Hey everybody, welcome to Drive-Thru Review 802. Today we're going to take a look at Molly House from Whirligig Games. This is a co-design effort with Joe Kelly and Cole Wehrle. It is, or was, a Zenobia Award finalist. And if you don't know what the Zenobia Award was, actually what I'll do is I'll put a link to the video I did of this game during that time when it was part of the Zenobia Awards. It'll explain all that in that video. I will say the design has changed in some ways drastically from the design in that video and when it was up for the Zenobia Award. In a lot of ways it's kind of still retained a lot of the same feelings and evocations of emotion and all that kind of stuff with this design. So it's a co-design effort. It's just coming out now. I think backers and such are getting their copies or have gotten their copies. And what the game features is it's Molly House. So back in sort of like late sort of 1800s or 1900s London, there were these various different establishments, Molly houses, where queer men could go and be themselves, basically. And so it was a different sort of establishments there. There would be lots of parties, lots of goings-ons. And what this game is about is actually doing that, going and throwing parties and trying not to get sort of caught by the authorities at hand. I believe it was called like the Society of Manners or Reformation of Manners, some nonsense like that. And so it's an interesting dynamic. So it's a very different style of game than I think most games that are out there. You're going to be doing this through different sort of interesting sort of card play, which is almost like, it's like a little bit trick taking, a little bit like poker hands, set collection, reading each other, bluffing, card counting, all that kind of stuff. So there's that sort of core mechanism, which is pretty simple, but there's a lot of like implications from it. And then there's kind of like, it's actually like a roll and move in a lot of ways. But really, not to spoil the lead, kind of the coolest roll and move mechanisms that I've ever seen. And I kind of want to take this and use this when I play Talisman or something like that. I'm like, oh, I want to use exactly this mechanism with different values for Talisman. Anyway, so you're going to be moving around the board, collecting items, collecting sets of cards, trying not to get caught. So it is kind of a semi-cooperative game because all the players can effectively win, and then there'll be kind of one main winner because what you're trying to do at that point is score joy. So you score joy individually as players, and also collectively there's a community joy marker, and that has to reach a certain amount by before, I should say, the end of 5 rounds. It could happen sooner. And if that happens, then it'll be kind of a joyful win, and then the player with the most joy is the winner. Now, if it doesn't reach there by the end of round 5, then everybody loses. But there's also another win condition where there's 4 of these Molly houses that are on the board. If one or all 4 of those have been raided and sort of shut down, then there'll be a different win condition for somebody that might have been an informant who kind of turncoated on their community and this kind of, I'll call it the scum of the earth victory. So if that happens, or if one Molly house is raided twice, that's also either of those cases, either all 4 are raided once or one of them is actually raided twice, then you'll trigger, I forget what the rules call it, I'm going to call it the scum of the earth victory. And then what happens, and there's another calculation in terms of victory points, and so basically whoever was like the best informant in that case will win the game. So all of this is built around, I know I've gone on a little bit long here, so I'm going to show you the rules, but I want to give you the concepts of it because I think those thematic concepts are so important to this game above and beyond the mechanics, which are very interesting. So let's go into that, and I'll just say, if you're still watching this intro, if you're someone that is like ambivalent towards the theme or something like that, or is not really a theme first type of player, which is fine, I'm going to spoil a little bit at the end of the review, but I think there's a very interesting card play mechanism here that is really, in some ways, like a new twist on trick-taking games. And as much as I talked about the roll and move earlier, I'd like to see that in more games. Although there was a game called Numeri, which came out like 30 years ago. That is also interesting. So, but nobody's ever heard of that game. But it kind of reminds me of that, the roll and move. So as much as the roll and move is cool, the card play mechanism, which is what happens when you throw these parties, you throw these festivities, and you have this card play dynamic there. It's not quite trick taking, but it's also kind of is. It's kind of something else. I think the game is even worthy of investigation for a lot of reasons, but also that is a big one too, I think. So I think that's important to look at. Yeah, so let's just go down to the table, and then I'll kind of give you a loose feeling of how you can move around the board, kind of do your normal actions, and then throw these parties. I've talked way too long for an intro. I don't normally talk this long, but let's go down to the board. I'm not going to get crazy with the rules. I'm going to give you the general sense, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so I've got the board here kind of set up. You can see there's various different spaces that you're going to have these little pawns. And I have here the wooden pawns. There are metal pawns which look really cool too, but I actually really like how these wooden ones work. They all kind of have kind of slightly different shapes. They almost look like different kings or queens in chess, which is appropriate. So each of these will represent a player, and they'll have here a little player board with a matching pawn there, and a little action summary here. And then you've got two spots there and there for these item cards, which you can go and collect. And these will be different special abilities. You can have two of these at a given time, and they're kind of one-time use. You discard them when you use them. And they're going to be very beneficial. I'll just say that now before I forget. You don't want to sleep on those item cards because they can really help you out during the game. And so if we take a look over here, I'm just going to kind of rudely scan over here. You can see we have these joy markers. You can see that black one there on the top. That's the community joy. We've got ones for the other different players. So they're going to go up this track, and then based on the player count, you can see there you need 30 for a 1 or 4 player game, 25 there for a 5 player game, and then down here 35 for a 2 and 3 player game. So that's your target. So you can see here you've got 5 rounds to do that, and then you could hit that earlier, and then that will end the game once that happens. And then you're going to see who goes up the highest on the joy, and they'll be the winner. And I explained all that in the intro, how the different end games work. But that's your little track there. So the other thing you'll see off the side here is a little display of cards. You've got a deck. You've got 4 cards here that you can choose from when you take and kind of draft them. You will pull cards out based on player count. So like 2 and 3 player game, I think you take out 7, 8, and 9 from what I recall. And so on. If you play with a full player count, you'll play with all the cards. So you can have cards going from like 1 to 7 or 1 to 8, 1 to 9 in 4 different suits. Those suits are represented by these molly houses here. So these are in the corner. So I just call them by the color, but you've got red, green, yellow, and blue down here on this side. So these are like pentacles, hearts, fans, and different things like that. But you got 4 suits. And here you can see some of the different types of cards. So the cards that are just like a number here, these are called desires. So it's just a number with a suit, and then you can see the stars. That's the amount of joy that card will score in different situations. Then you've got here mollies. You've got queens and jacks here. And so these are a little bit different. These don't actually score the player's joy. They can. There's a little combo thing you can do here, but by themselves they don't score player's joy. But you can see this little icon there. See, that's the community joy marker. When you throw a party, throw a festivity, they're going to score that much joy for the community, which is what you want. Because again, you can't be the only happy person. Everybody around you's got to be happy. And then you also have 2 types of these threat cards. So this one is the rogue. There's also the constables, which has a little C here. See, there's no joy scored for these guys. And then the constables will have a 0 value down here, but the rogues are very interesting because they will have a variable value. So players can get these little D10s, and then they can set the value there when they play that card and set it to be a certain value, because you're trying to do like runs or sets and so on. So that'll help it make it a little bit easier. But it's possible for the community deck here to flip cards when you throw parties. And when you flip one of these, in that case, then you'll roll randomly on the D10, and so you won't know quite what you'll get there. So that's a little breakdown of some of the components here. Oh, one thing to notice here is this, I don't know if you can see, that's kind of like a mouse pad material, which is nice because this is where you're going to be playing cards. And it kind of, dresses up the board nicely. So what are you going to do on your turn? You're always going to roll these 2 pink dice here. When you roll these, you're going to take a look at the boots on the dice. And so you can move, this is the roll and move part of it. So you can move either 1 space, 2 spaces, or 3 spaces. So you choose one of the dice, or both of the dice, and then move that many spaces. And you move that many spaces in a direction. So if I'm here, I can move 1, 2, or 3 spaces that way, or 1, 2, or 3 spaces that way. That's the best roll in terms of movement. But if you roll like 2 2s, you could roll basically 2 or 4. So you don't have as much choice in that case. Now the other thing you can roll here are these little X's. And that counts as a 0. So you can actually not move. So I can move 0 spaces or 2 spaces. The thing is, when you roll the X's, you're going to basically trash the card here that's furthest away from the deck. It's going to go into this gossip pile. This is the bad pile. This is where all the snitches live. So you always, when you roll this, you'll trash 1. If you roll 2 of them, you'll trash both of these here, both into the gossip pile. But then your movement, instead of 0 and 0, you can move anywhere on the board you want, which is fun. So you're going to trash these. These are going to go in here. Now something is going to trigger if you trash a threat, which we just did. So we trashed a red threat. If you trash a threat, and that happens not just in this case, but in other cases where they may go to the discard pile, the gossip pile, then players that have the most reputation in red, so this is my hand, but if these are in front of me, these cards will be played out. In this case, I have 2 reputation, you just count the 2 there. Of course, in this case, these actually count as 10 for the value. And you're going to add that up, the cards in front of you, so you're going to add the numbers. They will then have to be exposed. They have to discard these. These go to this gossip pile. Now, why is that bad? And there'll be other instances in the game where cards in front of you will have to go to the gossip pile. The reason that's bad is because at the end of each round, you're going to grab all of these cards here. You're going to go through the whole deck. That is going to dictate the end of the round. During the course of the round, some cards are going to go here. Some are just going to get discarded face up to what's called the safe pile. That's your discard pile. So any cards there are fine. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a third of the cards out of the gossip pile. They're going to go into the safe pile, so they're going to be okay. Shuffle these up and then deal these back out. And then you're going to multiply anything that you have a threat for. So we don't have a threat for these, so these are fine. But in this case, we had 1 of these, so 1 threat. Multiply it by the number of other cards, so there's 2 others here. So now we're going to get 2 evidence against that particular color, okay? Now once we get 7 evidence, we're going to close that house, delete 7 evidence. So if we had 8 for some reason, we delete 7 but leave 1, and the house is closed. You can no longer throw parties at the house. I'll talk about parties in a minute. If we get another 7, that house closes a second time, and then we have the dirty scumbag victory, right? And so the other thing is that you are going to lose your cards to the gossip pile, and then you as well are going to collect some of this evidence against you and keep that on your player board, which can be kind of useful for a little bit, but also not super great. So that's why you want to kind of keep these threat cards out of the gossip pile if you can. At least kind of keep track, and there's, like I said, there's a little bit of card counting of what goes in there, which sort of houses are under threat, under investigation. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent there based on the roll and move part. So you're going to move, and then you can do 1 of 6 possible actions. So first thing you can do is indulge, and that is you can grab a card from the market over there that matches the color of the site you're on. So you can see we've got blue in this corner here. These middle sites don't have a color, and then the red ones are in this corner, and so on. So you can grab a card. So you maybe even grab a threat to play for later. The strategy will take some time to get. But that's one action. Just grab a card from the display that matches your color. You can lie low, which is just grab a card off the top of the deck. You can accuse another player of being an informant. We'll skip that, I'll come back to it. You can throw a party in one of the corners. We'll skip that. Throw a festivity, I should say. Now you can also cruise. Cruise is done in the places that are adjacent to the house. And when you do that, you'll play a card matching that color, and then you'll look at your reputation total. You'll not look at the values of the cards in this case, like you did with the trashing, but you can look at the total number of cards, just to count the color of cards plus the color of cubes. You will draw that many cards out of the deck. Up to a max of 4. You can never draw more than 4. And you have a hand limit of 6. You can have as many as you want during your turn, but at the end of your turn, you got to go down to 6. Those go into the gossip pile. So just know that. And if you're being a scumbag, which is acceptable within the confines of this game, you might want to put some stuff in the gossip pile. But that's what cruises. You play a card, then you draw a card equal to that reputation. And you can also shop, which is just go here and grab an item. So if you land here, you can grab the item if you want. Anytime you grab an item, you can see this little indication there. So when taken, you're going to X out a card there from the bottom of that row there. So that's another way to get cards out of that row. So those are your actions. So the 2 I skipped over are the accusation ones and the festivity ones. We got to talk about the festivity first, and then we can talk about the accusation. So when you do a festivity, this is when you start to play cards out of your hand. So the first thing that's going to happen, the first thing that you need to know is that each player by default can play up to 2 cards. So what kind of cards are you trying to play? Well, here are the different sets you're trying to make. So the best thing you're trying to make, if you're trying to be the most joyous, is a surprise ball. And what that is, you can see these are all the same suit and it's a straight. So 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a surprise ball. That's the highest hand. Next is a christening. This is any queen plus 3 of a kind. The next one is a dance, which is a jack, and this is just a straight. Doesn't have to be the same suit. If you can't sort of assemble one of these, great parties, then by default it goes down to a quiet gathering, which is like a negative party. You don't normally want to have this. So in this case, you just figure out what the 4 lowest cards are, and then the community will lose reputation, as well as the guy that threw the party. So the way that this happens is, like I said, everybody can play up to 2 cards. The person that throws the festivity, and again, you have to be at a Molly house to do that, has to play 2 cards. They've got to play at least 2 cards out of their hand. Now the other thing that's going to happen is we're going to take, let's say we're throwing the festivity, you're going to take the candelabra, put that in front of you so you remember whose turn it was, because you're going to go around the table, and then the player to their left will go take their turn. So the first thing that happens after you take this is the community deck here. Take it off the camera. We'll flop a card into the middle. So that's the community pile. And then maybe I'll play, I say, oh, I got a 6. And then maybe I have also a jack in my hand. Now here's the thing. You cannot say exactly what you have, but you can kind of table talk. But you're not really supposed to describe what's in your hand. You could say something like, and I think this is going to vary from people to people. You say like, I kind of feel like we should have a dance, which means that probably I have a jack and maybe I've got a card that will combo with the 6. And you say, hey, maybe can you somebody help me out with the dance? And somebody might say, oh no, wait, I think we should throw a surprise ball, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to play these cards. So maybe I'll just get some cards out here. So I throw a jack out, and then this guy plays a 6, so we're in good shape. We just need another 6. And then this other player says, you know what, I'm being a fuddy-dud, I'm going to throw that in there. Then we're going to flip another card off the top of the deck. And then now I have to play a card since I started it. Now it's worth noting that the other players can pass just right out the gate and not be involved at all, because maybe they don't have anything, maybe they don't want to be helpful, whatever the case may be. And then maybe this guy said, you know what? I think we should lay low. So they're going to put this in out there, or maybe I just played like something else, because he said, hey, we're going to lay low. And then you're just going to go around that way, and you're going to look for the best possible hand. Now the reason you might want to lay low is because remember, these are zeros, okay? So you might want to get rid of these, because any cards that you pick out of the set here to match whatever you end up scoring is going to go out into the safe pile. Any cards that are left over are going to go into the gossip pile, and again, those might be coming back up later at the end of the round to sort of, again, plant evidence against these different things. So there's going to be some table talk there, some discussion about what you want to do, because you do want to get these out of the system. So you kind of need to chill and lay low and be quiet there. Now it's worth noting that these rogues will never participate in a quiet gathering, because you can set them to a 0 if you wanted, but they won't participate. You cannot score these in a quiet gathering. You can score these in any of these other ones, so they're very flexible and nice, but they're not going to help you out to get rid of the constables, because they're sort of like the rules kind of describe them. They're kind of snitches. They're kind of like, the only words I can think of are dirty words or nasty words. They're just jerks. Let's just put it at that. They're kind of wiffle waffle. Don't know who they are. I don't know. They just, they're kind of a-holes. But you can make use of them, to have some good parties, I guess. But it's interesting gameplay wise. So anyway, you're going to score those. Anything that you score, you're going to score that joy for yourself. Any of the cards that are in here are going to score joy for the community, which again is where these mollies come in, the jacks and the queens. Now, if you play a jack, you're not going to get any points out of it because, again, this indicates you only score that joy for the community, which is in the center. So if they end up in the center, that's great. And that can be a fun part when the community deck flips a molly and you're like, oh, okay, great. This is a great time. This so-and-so showed up to the party and they're a big time name in the community. We got to throw a big bash, to help them out. See, it's interesting how the theme comes out there. So it really encourages you, in some cases, to either throw a quiet gathering if there's constables about, or if somebody, like a superstar shows up, it encourages you to throw a big party. And maybe they both show up, so it gets really interesting. So again, you're not going to score points for you, but they are going to score points for the community, which is what you want to do that, especially early on. Because if you slow boat, I'll talk about this more in the review, but if you kind of slow boat at the beginning, you're setting yourself up for everybody to fail, not just, somebody being a traitor, because you've got to get enough activity to generate evidence if you're trying to flip it, or enough joy, obviously, to score kind of the normal victory. So everybody's going to score joy there. If their card is included in whatever the set is, that scores. And then whoever threw the party, you're going to get a bonus here depending on the type of party. So if you do a surprise ball, it's an extra +3 on the community joy, and it kind of goes down from there, and actually is negative if it's a quieted gathering because the community's bummed out. We showed up, everybody was sitting around like a bump in the log. It's no fun. And then you can see this little bonus here for the person that threw the party, who has the candelabra. They are going to look at their reputation. Those are all the cards that are down here in front of them that matches the house where they're at. They're going to get 1 extra joy for each of those cards. Okay, that's kind of a lot. I'm not going to get too much more into the intricacies of that. And then, like I said, once you gather up evidence, you're going to have these houses closed. You won't be able to throw parties there anymore. They're going to be shut down. So that's an interesting dynamic. And then the other part of it is, when you shut this down, and this is where we're going to get into the accusation part of it, you're going to look at who has a reputation. Again, you're not going to look at the values in this case, like you did for the discards. You're going to look at the number of cards and the number of influence tokens that you have with that house. So kind of the more stuff that you do there, and if you get kind of caught out, it's going to help you kind of do stuff there and score more points, but it's going to kind of put a target on your back, which is interesting. And so when you close that house, you're going to see who has the most reputation and then who has second most. And here you have these decks. Here's the item cards. These are only replenished at the end of the round. If you have the most reputation, you get a major indictment. And if you don't, you get a minor indictment. Let's just look at the major ones. The minor ones are just these, but not as bad. So here, at the end of the game, you may acquire a couple of these, but you're going to roll a d10 and you're going to reduce your joy score by that much. So you can see it's a pretty big swing. If you roll a hanging, then you are eliminated from the game right at the very end. So these are bad. Now you can get these pardoned, if you will, and that means you have to inform against one of the houses. So each player has 4 of these tokens. They have loyalty tokens, and then one of these here is an informer token, right? And so if at the end of the game you have an informer token on a closed house, you will have all of these removed. That's a little interesting because you could still be an informer in this game and still have the good, sugary Coke victory where we hit the right victory point, joy marker. And so because you don't necessarily have to sell out completely in a way. But if you have the other victory, where we close all the houses or close the house twice, you have to have an informer token to stay alive in that case. So what happens there is when evidence is dealt out and you get an evidence at the end of the round, then you secretly take one of these tokens, again 3 loyal and 1 informer, and whichever house you're closest to at that time, you must then place this token out. So you don't get to just place it where it was closed, you got to place it somewhere else. So again, the positioning towards the end of the game kind of becomes important, where you're like, okay, that one's closed, I've got these really bad indictments, I might get hanged or something or lose a ton of points, I need to kind of work my way over here to start informing people, and you start to behave sneakily on the board, which is interesting. And then people get suspicious. And so what they might do is they might go, and they have to be in the same spot as you, and then they say, I'm going to accuse you, and they're going to choose one of the houses where you might have a token, and they're going to say, I'm going to accuse you at this house, and they're going to flip that over. Now, if you are not an informant, then you get 3 joy. If you are, then they get 3 joy immediately, and then it's flipped up. And the opposite here, they get the 3 joy there, so that you're shown as an informer. At that point, the game's changed. There's a little bit of a player aid here. You got to kind of play with your hands up, your hands open. I mean, excess cards don't go to the gossip pile anymore, and all kinds of stuff. I don't want to bog it down. So then that's the accusation there. So that's also interesting. So you might even put a token down in a place that you know is going to close. It's not closed yet, but you're pretty sure it's going to close based on what's in there. Anyway, it's a whole dynamic. And again, if everything shuts down and you have at least one of these out, if you don't have any of these out and you were loyal, that's too bad. Now you're going to get joy at the end of the game for each loyal. You get 2 joy there, so that's good. That's how the accusation works. Be in the same place, and then you pick one of their tokens, which might be in any corner of the board, and then try to accuse them of that. There's probably a couple more rules I've left out, but that's kind of gives you the general feel of the game. So let's go back to my talking head. Okay, so that was a somewhat brief overview of Molly House. I did drop in some strategic considerations and some thematic considerations, which I might forget to talk about now, just because I think in context of the mechanics, it's important. So if you're one of those that likes to skip to just the end, totally fine. That's what the timestamps are there for. But just you might want to go through and just kind of watch or listen a little bit to that as well, because it's a little bit of an abstract game, right? Because you've got this kind of card play, poker hand, trick taking kind of thing with some really interesting, dynamic, heavy, thematic, and emotional kinds of considerations. So enough of that. We'll get to that more in a minute. Let's go through my 3 pillars of review. What is the playtime on this? The playtime, give me a second. Playtime says 1 to 2 hours. I think so, yeah. Now I've only played it solo and 3-player. Definitely the solo game, well no, the solo game probably took about 2 hours, but I'm still like in the learning part of it, only having played it twice. And all the other players at the table with the 3-player game, we were also learning. So I think it took us a little over 2 hours, but not much. And now that we've played it, it will go much quicker. And we kind of understand how to watch the decks, watch the gossip deck, watch the flow of the cards through the display, and like what you've got in your hand and what to keep at the end of the round and all that stuff. So that is like, it's very simple, but it's also very tricky to figure out like, what should I really be doing here? So I think your playtime is going to come down drastically, I think. So yeah, playtime, I think you could get it down. In a 5-player game, probably 2 hours, maybe a little more. But again, as players know, it's going to be easier. Now, play count. I really liked it solo, and I really, really liked it with 3 players. I think the social dynamic is something not to be missed out on with this game, with a lot of the discussion and the banter and the talking, the accusations, and that kind of stuff. That really comes through in a really good way, and in a very honestly, a very unique and interesting way. We've seen a lot of trader games, Battlestar Galactica and those kind of games, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, that thing. This does that in a similar way, but it does it in a really new and different way. Because you can, like I said during the walkthrough, you can still kind of be an informant, but still be on the side of good in a way, and the side of joy. And so that's very interesting. It's not it's not like an A and B situation. And you kind of have to it's very interesting because it's not black and white, and it's like it gives you the feeling of watching your back, but still wanting to be a part of the group. And that's an interesting dynamic that I've not really ever seen before. So if you're playing, solo, you miss out on part of that. Now I will say, I meant to take this down earlier, the solo game, I haven't reviewed this yet, I plan to soon, reminds me of this, which I serendipitously have been playing for the last month or so, Fellowship of the Ring, which is, I've been playing this solo. And the solo game in this kind of reminds me of the way you play solo this, where you have kind of 4 hands of cards, and you're able to kind of manipulate those hands with some different actions, and try to navigate your way through whatever the end trick is going to be, whatever the end party is going to be. It's really cool. It's really interesting. And it has this other dynamic where you have this, a lot of times you have these automata cards, or whatever they're called. You flip them over and it says, okay, flip this over, and then the AI does this. Well, this gives you a very interesting thing. It gives you 2 choices. You say, okay, you either pick this or this. And you'd be like, okay, it's going to do this. Ooh, that's bad. Don't want to do that side. And you go here like, ooh, that's bad. But then the rest of it's okay. So you're like making this weird choice between that. And the AI kind of collectively acts as 4 other players versus your 1. And it's just really slick and easy. Like it's very cool. And I think it's the same designer. I think Ricky Royal did the solo for this and PAX Premier 2nd Edition. I kind of bounced off the solo for PAX Premier 2nd Edition. I like this a lot more. It's a lot simpler, frankly. But it kind of makes me want to go back and try that again, because I really like PAX Premier 2nd Edition too. So I like that. I think if you were to just get this game for solo, I don't know. I played solo after playing 3-player. I do not know that I would be able to really intuit what I'm supposed to do playing it solo if I didn't have that experience playing with other players and having the sort of crosstalk and the extra brains at the table, frankly. So it could just be a me thing, but I think if I were to recommend this for just playing solo, it's tough. I think you're going to like it, but I think it will be a struggle for your first play or two to kind of grok it. But having that experience of playing with players, I was much more easily able to get into the solo game, which I really enjoy. So preference-wise, probably with players, I would say. And probably, I don't know about 2-player with this game. That's probably the 1-player kind I'm not sure about. But I think 4 and 5 would still be a lot of fun. Just because it's hard to explain this in a way that you'll believe me. But the way the deck kind of flows and the way that the good cards and the bad cards kind of come together and mishmash and like miss each other and then come back together again, I think that's going to work at all those player counts. I'm not sure about 2-player though, because you want enough cards in the mix to like build those sets up, right? And then with 5 players, it theoretically should be easier, but then you've got different targets and you've got different opportunities to throw in the threats and stuff like that. I will say 3-player worked perfectly. So it was great. And a lot of times 3-player can be a very tricky count with games because you've got, in a lot of senses, 2 players attacking one or 2 players attacking each other. And then the other player, because the other 2 are bloodying each other, they're able to go to victory. This doesn't have that kind of dynamic at all. It just can't exist. So I think no matter what player count, except 2 I'm not sure about, I'd have to try it. I think you're going to do well for. Now, my last pillar is, what is this game like? And I've kind of talked a little bit about it. It's tough. There's no game like this. There's no game like this. I think one of the interesting things is, and I'm gonna put the link to the Zenobia video below, because I had a few people ask me, say, hey, would you please compare the design? And I know Joe, who's the original designer, has done interviews. I've not watched any. That's more of like me being a reviewer thing, not wanting to taint it. I may go and watch them after, but I think I got some of the idea anyway just from playing it. I think to me the essence of the game is still there from the original design. I think this is a better design in some ways, in a lot of ways. It's a little bit more abstract. I think this is a little bit more obtuse. There's a little bit of a membrane there to get through the mechanics into the theme of it. Whereas the other one, it was a little bit more like a worker placement thing, and you had some movement and stuff, kind of like this. So it wasn't roll and move, and you had, instead of these hands of cards you were playing to throw these festivities, you were bringing items to the ball, right, to the event. And that was kind of your contribution. And they had different scores on them and abilities. And so the items are still here, and they will enhance. Again, I said during the walkthrough, don't sleep on the items, but these will enhance a lot of times your festivities and some other actions. So definitely, again, don't sleep out on those. But this one has that little abstract layer of that kind of pseudo poker hand trick taking thing, which I think is going to be a barrier for people, not in my opinion, a negative way, because it's a very interesting sort of nut to crack. And so I think that's my kind of thing about it. So, but the essence of it, the essence of all the stuff I talked about with like the betrayal, but not the full betrayal, and kind of watching your back, but also looking out for the community, and kind of the tug of war of that, not wanting to get caught, not wanting to get hanged, that was very, very much present in the original, and is still supremely present here. Like, we've lost none of that stuff, and that's really cool. So there's that aspect of it. And the other thing to talk about, I've talked enough about like the betrayal and the emotional dynamic there. And again, that trick taking aspect, that's a unique thing. It's just really cool. So if for some reason the theme doesn't jive with you and you're not really a thematic person, and I say that only because I think the theme is so well done here that frankly you're missing out if you don't want to get into the theme. But even if you don't, I think there's still a game here to chew on with the whole card play dynamic, because it does something very cool and very different with that. And I'm kind of glad that they, migrated the design to that, because that the one side tickles the right side of my brain, the other one tickles the left side of my brain, and it's good that way. So that's what I think you can take away from it. It's really an excellent game, a very unique, fresh game. I was talking to a friend of mine after we were done playing it, and if Cole watches this, I don't mean this in any kind of negative way, but I'm like, man, I think Cole's best when he's like redoing somebody else's games, because up until now, PAX Premier Second Edition has been my favorite Cole Wehrle design. I like Root, I liked Oath, I really like Arcs. I talked about it. I didn't care for the extra campaign, but the base game plus that first expansion, really like Arcs. That's probably my third favorite Cole Wehrle guy, because I think this one's competing with PAX Premier, because it's just like, man, when he gets a hold of something else and then he's like, let me just spin that in the wheel or whatever, it's like, wow. Just some really cool stuff. I mean, and this game couldn't be more different than PAX Premier Second Edition, which makes me want to retry John Company, because I'd never played Second Edition. I played First Edition and frankly didn't care for it, but I'm like, maybe he fixed it. Like not that he fixed this game, but he fixed PAX Premier and then this game, and I was like, man, let's check out John Company. Because again, I bounced off that one. But anyway, I'm kind of doing a tangent there, but it's just an interesting observation we had. It was like, man, he really does great stuff. And my buddy that I was talking to, he loves Root. I think he would call Root his favorite Cole Wehrle game too. So everybody's different. But yeah, I cannot recommend this enough. There's nice player aids and everything. The rules are really well done. They're very dense. Like I said, it's very easy. You just move around, get cards, collect cards, discard cards, build those sets. But the real trick of it is like, why am I doing this? And I think midway through your first game, I will say this, as I'll leave it with this. When we played the first round, it was like, there's like no tension here at all. It's just kind of happening. But then once you cycle through and you've got some cards in front of you, you're like, oh man, that deck's tiny now, because there's like a lot of cards out in people's reputation displays. And it's like, oh no, we're going to burn through this, and there's going to be a whole bunch of threats in that deck, and now I went all in on this, and I've exposed myself. I threw too good parties. They're too good. Everybody's aware now, and so we had this interesting kind of roll back to being very tight and conservative, and then it was like, how are we ever going to get joy back up, because we got a mindset collectively of playing way too tight. It's very interesting how the game does that, where it like encourages you to throw parties. And in that game, we actually hit the 35 points, 35 joy, right on the money. Because we were lucky, because if we didn't get that, then it was a game over for everybody. And I think there was one house, all 4 houses weren't about to flip, but the one was about to do it a second time, but it was like one condition, one evidence away. But yeah, the game, so what I'm trying to say there is, as you play through the game, it will sort of morph and sort of tighten up in a way. Like it'll get a lot more stressful and fun and interesting. But the game, on the other hand, is really trying to encourage you to throw the big bashes. Because I could see in a case like this, if you kind of skated through, but you were able to get good hands and entice people to participate at your parties and get a big score and get that community score driven up, you're going to have a much easier time of making sure you hit that victory in time. But then that's going to kind of open you up to some more targeted attacks and, being exposed and get indictments and all that kind of stuff. So that's the other part about the game, is it like really plays with you in a way to make you sort of step out there and put yourself out there. Like it forces you have to. You cannot just turtle it, because everybody's just going to lose. So it forces you to get out there and put these events together. And that's an interesting dynamic, that it just encourages you to do that. And then everything comes back at you. Right, it's cool. That dynamic is really, really interesting. And again, it's not something I've really seen in a game. So just for that alone. Anyway, that is Molly House. Definitely take a look at this one. Thanks.